It's the Scene World podcast. I'm AJ. He's Joerg. Neither of us are wearing bikinis.
That's good to know.
That's very, very good for the viewers. In a minute, we have Scotty Allen from Strange Parts.
Who's also known as the iPhone guy.
Yes. So that's happening in a minute, very shortly, because I don't think we have very much news. This is part one of our special June extravaganza of repair
Rights
month.
to repair. Yeah.
This is not. I don't think it's an actual it's not official right to repair month, but we're making it our internal Scene World right to repair month. So we're kicking that off with Scotty, and we've got some other guests coming in throughout the month that should be interesting. We're not going to say who they are just yet because it's going to be a surprise.
Anyway, I have to say thank you for Scotty for being so enthusiastic and wanting to talk to us. And well, I kept trying. So I'm really sure people will love. He was very open in what he would tell us. So I guess there's a lot of background that people didn't know yet about Strange Parts that we will reveal in this interview.
Yes. So that is shortly.
Before
that,
news.
though, yes, news. I've got some, which I've forgotten already because.
Nice.
Okay. No. Okay. So Cytronic, who is one of the big C64 software publishers at this point, they have just announced that they will be releasing Kings Valley 64, which is a classic game, which had been converted to the Spectrum, the ZX Spectrum, in 2009, and has now been converted to the 64. I don't know what it was originally on. I don't know what the original platform of Kings Valley was, but it is going to be distributed and released by Cytronic.
Yeah. And the other news is that Retrobit actually started reproducing with license from Sega the original official Sega Mega Drive controllers, 6-button arcade pad with the original D-Sub 9-pin ports. And just as a reminder, because many people don't know that, despite you can connect them to the Z64, you shouldn't, because they are causing signals that can actually burn your CIA or your SID chip.
There's a thing. It's called the 64 JPX Red, I believe it is. I have it on mine because I use a Sega Genesis controller on my 64, and it converts the signals to something that's not going to blow up your computer.
Exactly. And for many, many years, people were saying this is fake, this is not true. But actually, I had the C64G where this happened. Mm-hmm. The CIA was toast.
Yes. And I think Master System controllers you can plug in with no problem, but the Genesis and Mega Drive, as they're called in Europe, you can't.
Yeah. And interestingly, actually you have to say the Mega Drive is the original name because it was also named that way in Japan. Mm-hmm. So the exclusion is the exception here is America.
Actually. Yeah, I don't know exactly what the point of like.
There is another product called the Mega Drive. That is why they weren't allowed. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. That is why they weren't allowed.
Genesis doesn't sound like a video game console. Genesis is like a biblical book.
I know.
It's a weird like why not just call it like the Super Sega or something like that, like Super Nintendo.
But it has blast processing.
Yes. Okay.
Anyway,
well, they could have called it the Sega Blast or something, like something that would make you think more gaming than like Genesis. Genesis is either a biblical book or a band with Phil Collins, neither of which is incredibly exciting.
Well, my dad loves Phil Collins.
So do I. Phil Collins is pretty much the embodiment of all that is awesome about the 80s. Love Phil Collins to death. But It does not garner the idea of a awesome video game console.
Yeah. Anyway, the interesting thing is, it's actually exclusive on Amazon, so you can't get it from eBay. You can't get it from anywhere else. On the other places where you can get this controller, it's just a USB version for the PC. So Amazon is exclusive. And if you buy it from Europe, from a European Amazon, you get the European version with a red start button. And if you buy it from Amazon USA, you get the Genesis version, which is with a blue start button.
Okay.
So they really made it 100% like the original, including the button colors.
Coolio.
Yeah, which is of course bullshit because I don't know. But anyway, it's really 100% the original thing. And they also made a blue edition that of course is not original. It's called Clear Blue for Mega Drive 1 and Mega Drive 2. So if you want to have Clear Blue, you can get this too.
Okay.
The problem here is, compared to the Nintendo gamepads, the Mega Drive gamepads are really getting old, because the way they are made, with this contact plate of rubber and all this stuff. If the rubber is getting old and falling apart, there's no way of fixing this thing for good.
Right.
So I bought tons of controllers on eBay, and many of them were broken despite they were listed as working. And then the seller told me, yeah, we tested it like 5 years ago and then we put it in stock. So they don't age very well. So do yourself a favor, and I would say get them, because there will not be any chance to get the 6-button version anymore. Of course, there are games like the Streets of Rage series that don't work with the 6-button controllers. They make wrong inputs. You need the 3-button controllers, which is really weird because people didn't believe this. I had a friend over like, okay, you need the 3-button controllers. And we actually had a few months ago an interview with Stefano Arnold from Tectoy, and we spoke about this with Andrew Fisher and me on the podcast, where I was asking why you didn't do the 6-button version, and he told me because people preferred the 3-button version, which is strange because games like Mortal Kombat can't even be played correctly with the 3-button controller. So never really understood why they decided to reproduce the 3-button controllers. I'm not sure if the reason is just the customers didn't want the 6-button controllers, because seriously, I wouldn't get a 3-button controller just because one game has an issue and prefer it over the 6-button controllers.
I think I got a 3-button. I think that's what I use on my 64. But then, of course, the 64 only has 1 button. So
actually, it has 2.
Well, yeah, but nothing uses it.
Most people don't know that. Actually, Chase HQ2 uses it. That is why the GS controller actually has a 2nd button, because the 2nd button is actually used for turbo, and on the version of the game for normal joysticks, that is just space key. And Super Mario Bros. Is supporting the 2nd button.
Yeah, Super Mario Brothers also, it's got a couple of different configurations for that. And the JPX Red for the 64, which is what you use to plug in your Sega Genesis controller, has a couple of different modes in which it maps one of the buttons to the up, to like the controller up thing. So you can use that to jump. And using that, with the 64 version of Super Mario Brothers, this is the first time I've ever actually beaten Super Mario Brothers.
Wow, nice.
Which is pretty, yeah.
Actually, interestingly, my adapter was handmade by my grandfather, so I have neither of those options. But I got the GS and the original joystick, which is bullshit, by the way. Because the quality is awful.
Yeah.
But hey, the machine was already
Commodore.
great. Because Commodore wasn't shipped with good joysticks. That's true. You know, and actually, I bought myself 2 of those controllers that were sold by this guy, Retro Game Boys, on eBay. It's a Commodore 64 Atari 2600 replacement controller.
Right.
So I bought them, and they are still waiting at custom, sitting there to get shipped to me.
Okay.
So let's see how well that goes. They are costing $34 a piece, and he already sold 58.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. It's a yeah. I think I know exactly what you're talking about. They're on eBay. I see them for sale. They're like new looking controllers.
Yeah.
They're really good looking things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got them on my watch list. I'm thinking about
and it's actually homemade. If you look, there's a picture of the PCB where it actually says Retro Game Boys 1.0, though they are newly produced controllers.
Yeah, I was thinking about getting one too, just because they look so awesome and
I know. Of course, I got the Commodore 64 version, not the Atari labeled version.
Yep.
It's awesome. So
there's no difference. It's just the label is different.
I know.
There's
because Atari versus Commodore.
Yeah.
I have a friend for whom it's still a thing. Yeah. So I'm always mocking him about it.
Hey, we brought it up in the last podcast, but I want to show everybody that Nick Vivid's album is out. I have it on cassette because I'm just that
Still
cool.
waiting for mine. Still waiting for mine to
So that is there. You can find it at nickvivid.com. There's lots of different websites. We'll link them all. So check it out. Buy that because it's awesome.
And I also want to make a correction in the podcast, the one before the last one with the Houston family. I accidentally confused Chris Hulsbeck with Rob Hubbard when we talked about Samantha Fox Strip Poker, who made the music for it. So I'm sorry for that. Nobody said this word, but the thing is, I knew it better. In this second, it slipped my mind, and when I edited it, I heard it, but I forgot to cut it out.
So who actually did the music for Samantha Fox Strip Poker?
Rob Hubbard.
Oh, okay.
And none of the Housons actually noted the mistake and didn't correct me. So hey.
Well, you probably could have just let it go and no one would have ever noticed.
We will cut this out. No, we will leave it in.
Yeah.
I think a good journalistic project should be ready to correct their mistakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that said, yeah.
So what we can do is actually making a remix of the game and let Chris Hulsbeck do the music, and then suddenly I was right.
There you go.
Oh,
yes.
Oh yeah, about the controller thing. They also make the same controllers for the Saturn, also original, but my Saturn controllers are still awesome, like new. So I'm not sure if I will get new Saturn controllers. Maybe in a few weeks, months.
Okay.
Anyway, the Mega Drive controllers are awesome.
Cool. So anyway, Scotty Allen is waiting right over there to talk to us about strange parts and iPhones and all the stuff that he's doing. So let's go talk to him and find out about that. So today we're talking to Scotty Allen. He is the guy behind Strange Parts. And as Joerg said before, the iPhone guy. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So the thing is, you became pretty famous. Actually, to this point, you have over 1 million YouTube subscribers because you had the idea of moving to China and building your own device out of single parts from the electronics market.
Yeah, that's how I've gotten my start here anyway, and probably the thing that people still know me for. I'm trying to obviously broaden the channel beyond just being the iPhone guy in China. But it's I mean, it's gotten things off to a really exciting start here.
Yeah, actually, when AJ and I discussed if you would be suitable as a guest, you were actually doing this pinball factoring video in China.
Oh, yeah,
it's like,
right.
This is our guy, retro.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
perfect.
totally. Yeah, so I'm trying to broaden into more avenues of manufacturing, and I guess I think of Strange Parts as a travel show for geeks. So it's sort of the blend of adventure, technology, and travel. And different content that we produce sort of hits on different of those three areas in different amounts. But that's kind of the area that we're playing in anyway.
But let's start way earlier. How did it actually happen that you tinkered with electronics? And I guess you have a degree in engineering.
I do.
Point.
I have a degree in computer science actually. So I at least professionally come from the software side. But I started. I mean, my interest in electronics started when I was a kid. Probably at, I don't know, 5 or 6. My dad bought me one of those big 6-volt lantern batteries that had the screw terminals on top, and some wire and some buzzers and lights and switches. And I had great fun playing around with that. And that grew to learning to solder at probably, I don't know, 7 or 8. And wanting to build my own robot and all sorts of tinkering. I was always taking all of the stuff in the house apart, and whether it worked or not. And it didn't work by the time I got done with it. And so that then led to an interest with computers, sort of in parallel. I in high school and college thought I was going to have a career as a lighting designer in theater, and later, I kind of realized that the part that I liked most about that was the technology and was all of the gadgets that you got to play with doing that, and ended up with a career in software engineering, and then I feel like it's kind of come full circle because now I am ostensibly an entertainer about electronics, on the internet. So it feels like what I'm doing now is kind of a merging of all of my various things that I've been interested in the past.
Interestingly, in your other interviews, I mean, so far you only did like 12, 13 minutes interviews from what I saw, and you were describing yourself as a nomad, and in your recent videos, actually, you said you want to build an office in China.
Yeah.
And so you are changing your lifestyle a bit and finally get settled in a way.
A bit. I don't know. I mean, I still definitely think of myself as a nomad, and I think there's going to be a strong component of travel in Strange Parts. Probably more travel in the future than there has been the past 2 years. But I'm also realizing that I want to continue doing content around building things, and you really need a space to do that. And so we're in the process of. I've just hired a head of operations to help me with all of the logistical problems that creating this kind of content involves in all sorts of strange places in the world. And so we're actively working right now to find a workshop where we can do that kind of stuff in Shenzhen. But we're also gearing up to do some exciting travel in Africa hopefully this year. Probably some stuff in India. I've got a couple other places that I've got my eyes on. So definitely I don't foresee giving up the travel component anytime soon.
I remember seeing recently the video from the guy in Qatar, and my first thought was like, okay, his English is not so good because we were talking about falcons and stuff.
Yeah.
And when you switch the topic to horses, he totally went crazy and told you about the love of horses. I was like, okay, it's not a matter of English. He didn't just like the topic you have chosen.
It's just a matter of interest rather than English.
So,
absolutely.
So I found this interesting that next to tinkering with electronics, you also focus on people and the society in other countries. That's a totally different theme. And to bake this into the same YouTube channel is kind of unique, because normally people like do several channels, you know, travel channel, electronics channel, tinkering channel, but you put it all in the same YouTube channel, and you made yourself kind of a brand because of the way you are in front of camera.
Yeah, I'm trying anyway. I mean, you've definitely picked up part of the sort of underlying mission maybe of Strange Parts, which is, you know, I'm trying to make content that appeals to geeks first and foremost, people like myself that are sort of curious about how the world works, that are curious about technology, that are curious about the industrial world and how things are made and physical things, and all of the weird sort of side effects and things that come out of that. And markets is definitely one of the more interesting things, I think, and one of the lenses into that world, which is how I found myself in Doha looking at the falcon market where they sell $1 million falcons. But I think, I mean, I have been traveling all over the world, but in very out of the way places for almost 20 years now. And I think one of the things that I have realized in my travels has been how genuinely friendly and sort of open and welcoming the vast majority of people are, regardless of where you are in the world. But that also our sort of 24-hour news cycle media is incentivized not to really communicate that very well to people. And so I've really realized that there might be an opportunity here with Strange Parts to sort of bring people in on sort of the technology angle and the geek angle, but also to use that as maybe an opportunity to show them a bit about what life in these countries is like, and hopefully start to change people's minds a little bit about what, you know, what someone, say, from the Middle East is like, or what someone from China is like, through the lens of what everyday life is like, as opposed to these sort of newsworthy events that we see in the media. I mean, there's the saying, like, what bleeds leads, right? In the mainstream news, and therefore the headline of people in Qatar are really nice and friendly and everything was normal today is not a headline, right? Like, it's not a headline that any newspaper or TV show can run, and nor is it like a YouTube-worthy video title. But it's something that I think I have the opportunity to show a little bit of, a little glimpse into along the way, and that's something that's like very sort of near and dear to my heart, that I'm passionate about. I feel like I have an opportunity there. And to maybe change the world in some small way through sort of showing people this lens into these very different parts of the world and different societies and cultures.
So YouTube is just a media to show people what you want to show them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, YouTube is just a platform, right? And you know, whether it's YouTube now or another platform in the future, like, I'm just really excited to be continuing to tell these types of stories and to sort of bring people along with me on these adventures. And so YouTube happens to be the place that I have found an audience so far, and it continues to be the platform where I sort of get the most promotion. So where I can get the most new people finding out about my work, and so it's been really great for me in that regard. And if that changes to another platform in the future, then I'll embrace that. But it's been a great place for telling the stories I want to tell right now. So yeah.
Right now, it seems like there are two main platforms, Twitch and YouTube.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I've looked at doing live streaming. It's a little bit tricky telling some of the stories that I want to tell, both from like a connectivity perspective. I don't want to dive too much into the details, but I'm sure people know, like, connectivity in China is tricky. And because I spend a lot of time there is why I can't really talk about the details very publicly. But I'm sure you can read online about sort of what some of the challenges there are. The other challenge is one that I can talk about, which is that sometimes I'm in areas where there are sensitive things going on, where there are things that not necessarily, like, the people doing them, it's kind of an open secret that they're happening and all the locals know, but they're not super excited to have them be really publicized. And so we're really, really, really careful about making sure that the video that we actually show to the world, hopefully is not going to get anybody in trouble, right? It's not going to cause any problems in people's lives. And that becomes really hard in a live context, right? So we're really relying on sort of the magic of editing to give ourselves the time to really review and scrub and make sure that we're not exposing something we shouldn't, that will harm, either me or somebody else. And so that's been my hesitation thus far, but we're definitely thinking about it. And it's something that, like, it definitely is this new medium. And there's some amazing channels like John from Only in Japan, John Dobb from Only in Japan is doing this Only in Japan Go channel. That's sort of an IRL streaming that's fantastic. And he's like very much opening my eyes to like the storytelling that is possible to do travel stuff, to do stuff out in the real world, live streaming over 4G, but then also telling these stories while he's live streaming that are then totally watchable afterwards as like their own standalone recorded content. And I think that type of format is fascinating. So definitely got my eye on that.
We had a YouTuber before, Kim Justice, who is pretty big in the retro era, and we talked about that as soon as you are big on YouTube, you get tons of interview requests and strange, promotion offers that are, fishy and so on. I mean, we, for example, we received something about if we want to start selling household products
I thought you were going to say
our
that
audience.
I thought you were going to say we were one of the fishy ones.
Yeah, no.
What kind of household products?
I was a bit surprised. Why would a game channel on Twitter message me about selling household products? And I wonder, how do you actually filter out who you do work with and who you don't work with? Because now you have 1 million subscribers, and my first thought was like, oh, Scotty, he's probably not even reading my email. And 24 hours later, you actually got an email the next morning, and as I saw, like, well, yeah, sure, we can do something together. So how does this process work to grow big as a YouTuber but not losing it?
Yeah, I think it's been tricky for me, and it's not to sort of toot my own horn, but I have had a little bit of a non-traditional path through that because my biggest video was my first one, right? And so my biggest viral success was literally the first video that I put on the channel. And so I had, from the very, very first day, I was like, didn't sleep for like several days straight, like talking to reporters, right? So that was like my entry to YouTube, was like this crazy viral bonanza, right? And doing like recorded TV interviews and stuff. And there were a whole bunch of things that happened in that first week or two that like I had zero experience dealing with. Like I got a copyright strike on that video within a couple of weeks, I think, on a song that I had paid to license. Like I had gone to a licensing site and paid to license a stock song, and we got a copyright strike on that. So there was like a ton of things and reporters and things like that. I think you're sort of asking specifically like, who do I do interviews with, and then who do I work with on sponsors? Is that kind of what you're asking?
The public mind is like YouTubers. They only get the best offers. It's easy. It's not really a good job. It's like, oh, they just did in front of a camera, shoot something and so on. But I think it's much more involved. You have to sort out what you do, what you don't, and totally. I think this process is totally more complex than what people think it is.
I think that's probably true. Let me see if I can sort of position it. I guess the first thing that I would say is, at least for my content, I put a ton of work into creating the videos themselves, right? So I wish that I had a channel. Some part of me wishes that I had a channel where I would just sit in front of a camera in my bedroom and could bang out 3 videos in an afternoon. The second video that I made about adding the headphone jack back to the iPhone, that took 3 months to record, and of full-time work. And I really was kind of working 7-day weeks most of that time, because I was racing Apple to their next iPhone announcement. I wanted to get out before they announced the next iPhone, and I beat them by 6 days. But I recorded over 250 hours of footage, which is insane. That's at or above the level that most feature films record, right? In terms of raw footage. And then you then sort of have to dive in and like wade through that and try and find where are the little bits of gold, because we took those 250 hours and edited those down to 33 minutes, right? Which is not totally unheard of in the documentary world, but it becomes this giant organization project, right? And then just shooting that, like being on camera for 250 hours is a lot. So I definitely hustle a lot on that front, and I feel like sometimes I work a lot harder than some other folks in the YouTube world. But I'm very passionate about what I do, and I realize that like to create the types of things that I want to create, that's the kind of work I got to put in, and I'm okay with that. On the business side, yeah, definitely like there is way more sort of inbound opportunity and offers and requests than I can possibly ever say yes to. And so I would say like on the interview front, I tend to try and say yes to everything that I can. I really like am very grateful for the coverage that I've gotten. It was really a very important part of growing the channel early on. I had a lot of reporters who were very friendly with me and really did some nice reporting on what I was doing, and it really helped me build the channel early on. And so I've always really had a philosophy of trying to get back to people as soon as they email me, for whether it's a TV channel, or whether it's a small independent newspaper reporter, or whether it's an indie podcast. Particularly right after I release a video, my goal is to respond within like 5 minutes of them emailing me, while they're still sitting in front of the computer. And I've successfully caught a few reporters off guard, calling them on their number in their email signature right after they sent me an email. And then it's nice because you can just kind of do the interview on the spot, and they can write their article and move on with their day, because they're super busy people. In terms of sponsors, I think that's a tricky one, and it's one that I've been really learning about, and am still learning about. I think there's kind of a couple tiers of sponsors that I sort of think of in my head. There are a couple of different groups, let's put it that way. There are sort of the general sponsors that are big brands that everybody's heard of, that sponsor lots and lots of podcasts and YouTubers, right? So your Audibles, your Squarespaces, your Men's Dollar Shave Club, your there's a whole bunch of others, right? Those I just try and find brands there that have a decent reputation and that like at least modestly fit with my content, right? And then we try and sort of make the dollars work, right? And then make sure that like what they want in terms of how they fit in with the content. So that they talk about this idea of an integration, which is sort of like where do we talk about their brand, and I try and make that as non-obnoxious as possible and as sort of seamless with the rest of the content, while still sort of disclosing that it's a sponsorship. Like try and not cram a terrible ad down people's throats, right? And so make it something that's actually still enjoyable to watch and fits with the rest of the video. And so there's back and forth on that. Then there's like specialty brands, right? So I did a sponsored factory tour of a PCB factory, of JLC PCB. And I already really wanted to make a factory tour of a PCB factory. That was already on my list of like, I want to show people how PCBs are made. I had already toured several PCB factories on my own, and I thought that would make for really great content for the channel. And so when they approached me out of the blue and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a factory tour for us? It was like an immediate yes, right? Like, yes, let's figure out how to do this, right? And then it was just mostly like discussing with them the details of how that would work, right? And so, there it's just sort of like the main decisions are like, can I make an interesting piece of content? And are you going to, like, is your product or your service or whatever good so that when people hear about it through Strange Parts, they're not going to be disappointed when they actually like purchase it, right? That they're going to have a good experience, right? And so that's, like, is the product good? Is the customer support good, right? And so, particularly for the Chinese brands, it's a little bit more due diligence of like figuring out, if I've never heard of them before, like we want to sort of learn more about them and make sure that the product is good and that we're not recommending something that sucks. And then the third category would be sort of like the low quality offers, and those are the ones that are just shotgunning everybody with like, hey, we have an iPhone charging cable. Do you want to review it? Right? We'll send you one for free, like in return for like a 10-minute video about our charging cable. And those just immediately go in the archive. They immediately get archived, and I don't ever reply to them. And like, it's just not. I don't really do product reviews. It's not really what Strange Parts is, and certainly not like iPhone charging cables. So unless we can do like a cool iPhone charging cable factory tour or something like that, I just don't know what to do with them, and they don't have a budget, and it's often a low quality product, and so it's just kind of kind of ignore them. I have gotten like some really out of left field offers, like you guys have. My favorite one was was makeup, like skincare. It was a dry brushing set, and we had a very interesting back and forth. I actually did reply to that one. It was like, have you looked at my channel at all? Like, how do you think this would be a good fit? And then the other thing was like, they didn't want to pay me, and they didn't even want to send me the dry brushing kit for free. They wanted to like give me a discount code so that I could get like a discounted brushing set, and I was just like, I don't understand what planet you're on that you think this would like interest me. So, yeah, that's the brief rundown of how I'm thinking about sponsorships right now.
Yeah, I mean, when we approach people, before we approach people, we actually discuss about it. And I remember Jay and we discussed how about you, Scotty?
Yeah.
And maybe AJ can explain a bit how his memory, how his mind goes with the topic of broaden audience and topics, because I remember when we started this, people were telling us like, don't try to get too much out of the retro focus, because then you will not target your main audience, and people will get bored, and you will lose readers or subscribers.
Were they telling us that?
Yeah, we had some feedbacks like that, and I don't know. What do you think, AJ? What is your opinion about that?
I don't see an issue with broadening our scope, because if there is some kind of, if it's something completely outside of the realm of what we do, then that's one thing. Like you said, when we were talking about you, there was suddenly like this retro pinball thing or arcade thing, and it's like, okay, that falls within our jurisdiction. We can kind of use that to twist it around. If it was something completely different, and I feel like we've gotten some offers for interviews from people that have nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
That it's not even a matter of like, it's content that the audience wouldn't find interesting. It's content I don't know anything about.
Yeah, right.
So you can't sit down and have a discussion with some people, because it's like it's totally in such huge different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think the thing that I think a lot about when I think about what videos to make, right? And I have a billion and one ideas for videos to make, right? But most of them don't get made. And one of the challenges for me is like, I sometimes know that there's an interesting story in something, right? But I worry that I won't be able to bring the audience along with me,
right,
into that. Like, I know that if I can get them to start watching, I think I'll be able to retain them, right? It's how do I get them to start watching, right? And so I think, particularly, and this might be a little bit of a YouTube specific problem. I think about how do I sell the video, right? Because really all I get to convince somebody to click on a video is like the thumbnail and the title and like their past experience of Strange Parts or Strange Parts' reputation, right? And I'm not quite at the point where people will click on any. I mean, the core Strange Parts hardcore fans will click on anything, right? But there's a much broader community that like will pick and choose topics, right? And they may not even necessarily have like watched many Strange Parts videos before. And I think those people are the ones I'm constantly thinking about of like, is this close enough to sort of the core of Strange Parts to bring them in, or how do I present this in a way that like is gonna appeal to them, right? So like one example is like I'd love to do some like textiles and clothing stuff. Because I think manufacturing and making clothing, I learned to sew as a young kid, probably around the same time as I learned to solder. My mom and I would make Halloween costumes together, and I learned to knit and weave and all these other sort of textile arts when I was quite young. And I think that stuff's fascinating and like very very closely related to sort of a lot of the other types of making and engineering and stuff. And it tickles the same part of my brain, right? That you know, things like electronics and woodworking, metalworking do. And I think the idea of like going to you know, a big sewing operation or a big weaving operation or a big knitting operation, like a big industrial operation, is fascinating to me. And I think a lot of people would be interested, but I don't know if I lead with the topic of like, you know, how shirts are made, am I going to be able to bring my existing audience along with me? And so that's always like the concern. And it sounds like that's sort of like where you guys are at too, right? Is like, how broad is too broad, or how far out of left field can you be and still bring your audience along with you?
Right.
One of your videos was, for example, about paintings, original paintings, not copies, made in China. And my first thought was like, okay, I'm not really interested in art and stuff. But then I watched it, and it was totally fascinating. I was like, okay, I'm glad that I watched this, because this is one of the most unique videos I've ever seen, you know? Because
I'm really glad you liked it.
Because people always connect China with not creative, only copycats, as you say. It's just low quality and nobody gives a shit, you know. Just rip off customers from abroad, China, and then you showed a different side, and I was like, oh wow, this is interesting. Yeah, so you give a new angle to China in a way.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. I've been wanting to make that video for like probably 2 years now. And it finally sort of rose to the top of the stack, and it was honestly like one of the ones that I was worried about, of like, how do I pitch this in a way that like is going to convince people to watch it? Because I know a lot of my audience doesn't consider themselves interested in art, but I know the details of this art village are so fascinating, and like the way this whole economy works. Like, people are going to be, if I can get people to watch, I think they'll be along for the ride once I can kind of suck them in. And so yeah, there was a lot of thought put into like, what can we do on the thumbnail? We actually like made 2 custom art PCBs, circuit boards, which we didn't end up using because in the thumbnail they didn't look like circuit boards, they look like art. And so I had to, like, at the very last minute, I said, this is just not, we're literally out there shooting thumbnails out in the middle of the markets, and I said, oh my god, this is not going to work. Like, we're just looking on the camera review screen, like, this is not obviously a PCB, and I had to run inside the markets and go buy a broken motherboard from somebody and use that instead. To try and communicate that idea of like, this is also about electronics. It's not just about painting, and we're actually using painting as a lens to look at a more complicated manufacturing ecosystem, right? Yeah.
I have to admit, what is different with approaching you compared to other guests we had? I was asked by your manager, Ben, if we can go further after this interview. And like you coming to Germany and talking about factoring and so on. And I said, well, I'm not really knowing factories, but I know people who are big in this arcade repair and retro repair and conserving things. Because what many people outside of the European Union don't know is that in 2015, there is video games and computer games and old computers and so on are now part of cultural good. So together with TV shows, series, books. So now the European Union is pushing millions in restoring video games and preserving them for the next generation.
That's super cool.
So I think that would be something that we could work with together if you're interested. Yeah. Because I know the head, and AJ knows him too, because we made an interview with them.
But I don't live in Germany, so.
Yeah. So, but we have Skype, fortunately, and they made a museum for arcade and pinball machines, and they are actually experts for mechanical pinball machines.
Interesting.
That
Interesting.
that in other countries or other places in the world are just put to the trash.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that would be a topic that has to be brought outside of Europe to also make countries that are not part of Europe aware of how important it is to preserve video games, computer games, and so on.
Totally.
Because this all started with a Frankfurt Film Museum, where we had an exhibition where AJ and I also took interviews with people from the game industry and cosplay and movie industry, and they actually spent millions on preserving discs and motherboards that are destroyed by acid and so on. I don't know if that is something you are interested, but I think
so.
that's really something that should be covered in a way, because if you leave Europe, people only know about archive.org having all the ROM images to download, and that's it. Nobody is interested in the hardware, in the actual machine, and that is why some software, some games is unfortunately lost because the graphic ROM was never dumped or something.
Yeah. Do you know about I visited when I was just in San Francisco a couple weeks ago. I visited Small Change Arcade. Do you know Matt at Small Change Arcade? Have you heard of that?
No. But we interviewed Richie Knuckles, who is pretty big in America, about Arcade Restore.
Okay, so Matt's doing something slightly different, which is Matt is taking broken arcade cabinet boards from original arcade cabinets, and he's fixing and restoring the boards, and then building replica cabinets that are 40% of the original size of the original cabinet, putting the original boards back in, getting a new CRT, and then building them out as these little mini cabinets.
That's cool.
Okay.
And they're super cool. I mean, he's putting like hundreds of hours into each one, and so they're like, they're primo, like all the details are correct kind of thing. I mean, it's not a perfect scaled down version, right? Because like the controls still have to be the same size. There are limitations on the CRT. You got to get the board to fit in just right, kind of thing. But in spirit, they are 100% accurate. And so it was really interesting hanging out with him. We went to Free Gold Watch in the Haight in San Francisco, which is a pinball arcade and screen printing shop. That has like a whole bunch of independent operators coming in and out. And they curate a whole bunch of games across sort of the spectrum of pinball eras, from like the super modern sort of big video screen games out of what's the big U.S. pinball manufacturer?
Stern,
right? So they have a bunch of like
Jackson
new
Pinball
Stern
is also big.
Yeah. So they like have everything from like brand new Stern machines to like old mechanical stuff, and then like super wacky stuff. Like, do you know the game Ice Cold Beer?
Of course, it's one of our most played arcade machines in the museum.
Oh, okay, awesome. So they have
and it
one
always
there,
breaks.
and I got to play it for the first time.
It always breaks because it has this wire that is this bar balanced on, where the ball is balanced on. And it's always breaking. This wire mechanism is always breaking. They always have to fix it every single time.
That doesn't surprise me at all. I looking at this thing, I was like, oh my god, like this is so mechanical. Like it looks, it looks ripe for breaking. But it's such a unique game design. I mean, it's so different from anything I'd ever played. And so that kind of stuff definitely gets me excited.
You mentioned corporations and brands, and you started working on the rights to repair movement from iFixit.
Yeah.
And how did that actually happen?
So iFixit approached me. We were sort of talking back and forth a little bit. I guess early on, I don't know. We exchanged emails, and then so Kelsey emailed me from iFixit, and said, hey, like, we really should have reached out sooner. Like, let's connect, let's do something together. And I had been wanting to reach out to them for a while, and I was just super busy. And so it happened that, like, right when she reached out, I was about to release a video about iPhone. I forget which one. And I said, well, hey, I've got this video coming up. Oh, I think it was a video about how to make your own iPhone. Because I had done a video about how I made my own iPhone. Is that when you put together?
I got mine modified because of this video on a red front.
Oh, nice. I haven't actually seen red fronts before. That's pretty awesome.
AliExpress.
Huh. I have not seen those in the markets. Usually the stuff in AliExpress I see in the markets first. I've not seen that before. That's super cool.
It's an iPhone 7 Plus, and so I went to a third-party repair store as soon as my 2 years warranty was over. The next day I was in the store, and they said, like, wow, red iPhone cover. Front, never seen that before. Awesome.
That's awesome.
So from this day, whenever I go to the store, I'm like, oh, you are this red iPhone guy, right?
So tell me about that, because I don't actually know. Did you have to buy an entire screen?
No, it's just the glass with the frame.
And so did they do the lamination in their shop then?
Yes.
Because
yes.
Oh, they did. Okay. So that's not super common, at least in the US, for shops to be doing their own LCD lamination.
They bought a special machine for they first used a wire to separate the glass with the screen, and then they said it will take 3 days, and then they made it in their big how you say it, garage, in their and they just said they put it together. It wasn't easy.
That's
they said it was the first time they did it, but they did it perfect.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, no, the guys in the markets in Shenzhen do it all the time, and it's actually not very much equipment that you need. You need, sort of 3 things. You need the vacuum heater thing to do the initial separation on the lamination. You need a press to sort of get everything all lined up for the optically clear adhesive, the glue in between, and then you need the vacuum chamber to remove the bubbles. And I'm surprised that more people in the US aren't doing it, because I don't know. I've looked at the economics of it. A sheet of glass in Shenzhen will cost you $1 or $2 for the front glass, and the OCA is cheap.
Paid $5.
Yeah,
for the glass in the front.
A very fair price with export and customs and shipping and all that.
And the glass is same quality as original Apple, so no
That's
problem
awesome.
about it. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm surprised I haven't seen more colors, because that color is literally just like painted onto the backside of the glass. So painting a new color, it should be trivial for them.
There were orange and dark blue and violet and purple on eBay, but eBay removed all the offers.
Interesting. Interesting.
So I guess Apple or somebody got interfering.
This is an area where I start to not understand trademark law, or I don't know what I guess it's sort of like, I've been just sort of thinking about it as customs, right? Because, like, okay, so that glass is a sheet of glass with some color printed on it, right? Yeah. It doesn't have a logo anywhere, right? Maybe it's covered by some like weird patent or like design patent, but like I don't really understand what the legalities are that are giving Apple, if it is in fact Apple that sort of got that stuff removed, which I imagine it is, either directly or indirectly. I don't understand what the mechanism they're using is for that, or why that is like correct or just.
Why it even matters? Why does it even matter? It's you said, it's a piece of glass.
Exactly. And so the analogy that I like to use for this stuff is I like to use cars, right? Of like, is it acceptable to make like an aftermarket windshield for a Toyota pickup truck, right? And like most people you would ask would be like, yeah, I don't see possibly why that would be a problem. Okay, so like what's different about that versus like making replacement glass for an iPhone screen?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you look at using the car analogy, Jeep outright encourages you to change everything on the vehicle. Right. They're like, yeah, you want to change that? Go ahead. Yeah, you want to rip out the entire suspension? Whatever, that's great.
Right.
We just spent millions of dollars to engineer it.
Right. Like I understand that there would be a point at which they would say, you know what, we don't really want to support a warranty on a vehicle you've replaced half the parts on.
Right.
But like, fair enough. I think people I think people understand that, right? I don't think there's a big dispute over like warranty, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now you have Apple saying things like, oh, well, people are going to hurt themselves replacing their own battery on their iPhone, which is like just patently false, right?
Yeah.
You know, or they you know, they say things like, oh, you know, it's not something that can be done by your average person, right? It requires specialized expertise, which is also just like patently false, right? Which is sort of where the campaign that we did for iFixit called I'm a Genius came from, right? Which is like, you know, they basically, we would work together on a previous video, and then Kelsey emailed me and said, hey, we're doing this campaign, basically talking about like people's repair stories of like repairing your own devices, and really encouraging other people to give that a try, under sort of this label of like, Apple says that only geniuses at the Genius Bar should be able to repair an iPhone. And therefore, if I've repaired an iPhone, like, does that make me a genius? And I was like, I love it, right? Because like, I thought that when, you know, before I started this iPhone project, I had never opened up a smartphone before, and I sort of saw it as this like black box, this magical device that was like indivisible, right? But at the same time, I had like built my own desktop computer. I had, you know, repaired laptops. Like, I had opened other stuff, right?
Me too. Yeah.
It wasn't like I was fundamentally afraid of using a screwdriver and opening up an electronic device, but somehow like smartphones felt different. And then when I sort of went down this rabbit hole of like trying to build my own iPhone, I realized like, this thing is no different than a desktop computer. It is just smaller and slightly more fragile, right? Like, you have to be more careful, and you have to like put your eyes closer to it to see the screws, right?
Yeah.
But in every other way, like, this is just a bunch of connectors that like press fit together. It's a bunch of screws and brackets, you know, and some like pop fit fittings. Like, it's almost the same mechanics as a desktop computer, just in a different form factor. And so, I don't know. I think I have gotten really passionate about sort of showing people behind the scenes there, and going like, hey, these devices aren't magic, right? You can pop them open, you can modify them, right? Like, there is this whole world here, and we have this weird superstition maybe around them that somehow they're different from the rest of the devices in our lives. And I think, you know, Apple and other manufacturers have kind of played that up a little bit, in ways that, I don't think are beneficial.
Well, Apple has gone full on with it, because even the new laptops that they've made, you can't do anything with really. Everything is just soldered on. And I've got an Apple laptop, and it's, you know, 9 years old at this point, because it was the last one that they made where you could do it. I got the base model. I upgraded the memory. I took out the DVD drive and put in a second hard drive. You know, all this stuff to it, like immediately on getting it.
So in Shenzhen, that's not a problem, right?
Right.
The fact that everything's soldered on, right? Like, people have just developed techniques for desoldering that stuff and replacing it. Right? And so, and they're just sort of, the average repair technician in Shenzhen is like significantly above most of the rest of the world. There are exceptions to that. But they have just not really seen that as a barrier. And so really, I mean, I think to some extent, sort of right to repair comes down to like, what are people going to get legally punished for, right?
Right.
And that actually, like, we do have the tools to do some of this repair. Maybe not, you know, maybe not at home, but like, it is still like available to third-party repair. We just need to make sure to not criminalize either the people doing those repairs, or access to the parts, or the ability for people to create replacement parts.
Right.
You know, because that is also like a huge issue, right? Of like third parties creating these things. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, actually, being on the retro boat, I actually got the opposite problem. To find people who still know how to repair CRT TVs and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That is more an issue for me. To find people who actually can do it, you know, because you can get the parts from eBay if you need to. That's not a problem. But knowledge is being lost after all those years, I have to admit, unfortunately.
Yeah. Matt at Small Change Arcade was saying the same thing, that he's having to having to tune all his own CRTs, and I didn't understand it in full depth, but chokes and aligning things, and you probably know a lot more than I do. Yeah, it sounded pretty gnarly, and then also you've sort of got high voltage in the mix, right? So so you can really hurt yourself there, yeah. Yeah, they're not. I mean, it sounds like even just to get CRTs now, like they aren't a dime a dozen, right? You can't order them new. You've got to find,
that's true.
Find someone that has the right one.
Yeah.
So I wonder, actually, good that you mentioned it. If you do your modification, how many tries did you have, and how many times you wasted your stuff? You put it in the bin because you destroyed it. I think, for example, about this one where you did your own contactless charging mod for the iPhone, and you were almost giving up on it. I was like, okay. Now this video is ending nasty, and in the last second, you did it like Apple did in the presentation. Like, there's one last thing, I got it working.
So actually, I want to be really clear. I didn't actually design that circuitry, right? That was designed by this Chinese guy Yeka, who is actually a fan of Strange Parts, and contacted me. And he has a booth in the markets, and brilliant sort of iPhone hacker, had been working on this for a year. And so really, I was trying to tell his story as much as I could, but also the story of me trying to get this thing working, right? To try this out. And it turned out like it still very much was sort of in alpha. His design was very much in alpha. And while very clever, the way he was sort of interfacing that board with the rest of the phone, was still needed tweaks here and there to be user friendly. On that project, I didn't have to throw away too much, but there was a lot of sort of back and forth with Yeka of like me trying stuff, going home and sort of sweating over it, and then going back to the markets and going, Yeka, I cannot get this to work, like and sort of him giving me a new part here or there, or at one point we thought maybe the battery was bad. So like the thing about the markets though is like, we thought while we were sort of testing in his booth that maybe we had a bad battery, and he literally just leans across the aisle to the booth in front of him and says, "Hey, can you loan me a battery for a minute?" And so the efficiencies of being in the markets are not to be underestimated. You are steps away from kind of any parts that you need, and that's a pretty amazing thing. But I ended up building 2 phones for that. And we probably went through a handful of like little flex PCB pigtails that he had designed for his wireless charger thing. Probably not too many parts for that. The one that I think the 2 that I went through the most parts on were the one that I really spent quite a bit of money on parts was the headphone jack video, and I went through, gosh, probably 6 or 8 iPhone screens, which I was using genuine OEM screens because of like very specific part tolerances, and those were, I think at the time I was paying $100 a piece for those. And so that started adding up. I went through a handful, probably 3 logic boards, maybe more than that, 3 or 4 logic boards, and those are a couple $100 a piece. And then stacks and stacks and stacks of iPhone backs, and then the other thing that I was spending a lot on was the lightning to headphone adapter, the little dongle that Apple makes. Because I was taking the insides of those out to get at the like lightning and DAC board that they have. It lives inside of the lightning connector itself. It's a PCB that sits sandwiched in there. And I was like disassembling these things to get out this little tiny PCB so that I could like solder it onto my PCB as like a daughter board, and then shove the whole thing into the phone. And at first I was buying those at the Apple Store for, I forget, 10 or 20 bucks a piece, something like that.
Jeez.
And I was buying like, I think I went in and bought 3 or 5 at once. It's in the video. And I bought a bunch, and the lady says, "Why do you need so many?" And I was like, I really don't want to tell her what I'm doing. So I just said that I kept breaking them, which is technically a lie. But I also wasn't using them quite as Apple had intended. And then I discovered that actually I could get them in the markets for much cheaper. Well, so I first looked in the markets and I found a whole bunch of knockoff ones, but they didn't have the same capabilities that the original ones did. They and some of them like didn't work at all, right? They would work for like a minute or two, and then the phone would brick them, or they would somehow they would stop working. There's some crazy things. So we're getting into like serious iPhone nerdery here, but the phone can do a firmware update on the chip inside a Lightning connector, and potentially like can get that firmware from the internet, which is a crazy thing. Which means theoretically, if you can find a backdoor in the reverse direction of a Lightning connector, like a Lightning device that plugs into the phone, if you could find some sort of vulnerability for the connector to then break into the phone, you now have the possibility to create a worm that is replicated via like iPhone charging cables or like Lightning devices, which would be bananas, right? But regardless, I found a source of genuine Lightning to headphone adapters in the markets that were like, I think I was paying $7, something like that, for them. I remember them being like 75% of the original price, and most sellers in the markets, if you ask the right question, you will get an honest answer. And so I asked her, where are you getting these from? And she said, oh, well, like it took a little while to figure out, but I figured out that they were parted out from, so there's a whole smuggling operation. There's a very large scale smuggling operation that smuggles phones from, and it's not just one operation, it's a lot of operations, that smuggle phones from Hong Kong into mainland China, because mainland China has tax, right? Has pretty significant sales tax, and Hong Kong has none. Right, so the price difference between buying a phone in an official Apple store in Shenzhen and an official Apple store in Hong Kong, which are 20 miles apart but are separated by the Hong Kong mainland border, is like $400, right? Wow. $400 more expensive than me, right? So that's like a really nice margin for somebody to go down and buy phones in Hong Kong and then bring them up into Shenzhen, right? But when they do that, they generally unbox them, right? Because they don't want to be bringing the whole iPhone boxes across. And the ways that they bring them across are bananas. They range from like duct taping 70 phones to people's body, and someone got caught at the border doing that. The photo is hilarious. To like running zip lines across the canal or the river from Hong Kong. And they were originally using a crossbow to do that. And then they upgraded to a drone and they got busted. But they were running baskets across the zip line, like baskets filled with 100 iPhones or whatever, right? And they were running baskets, multiple baskets, right? And then I'm sure there are a bunch of other creative ways, but these are just the ones that have sort of made the press in the past couple of years. But regardless, when you unbox these iPhones, you're left with all of the accessories in the box, and one of the accessories that they were shipping iPhones with was this little headphone adapter, right? And so those little headphone adapters then get sold separately in the markets as this sort of gray market economy for genuine headphone adapters if you're someone who needs one of those. Similarly, like the genuine charger, the genuine charging cable, the headphones, etc. That one, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I found a lady. I have a source for those, and I probably bought like 10 or 20 from her in the end. I would go and buy them like 5 or 10 at a time, and I don't know what she thought I was doing with them, but yeah.
It's totally interesting. So how is it if you are in China? Is it like you have to be careful to not getting like what is famous here, exploding batteries, cheap knockoff stuff, or is that not a problem?
Really? No. I've never seen or heard that be a problem in the markets. I'm sure it does happen, but it's not like I've ever been in the markets and somebody's had a battery on fire. I don't think it's much of an issue. I mean, I have 2 data points for you. So the one data point is like I have been going around these markets extensively for the past 3 years, and I've never once seen a fire, right? I've never once heard of a problem, right? And like, so if it happens, it's not very common. That being said, there used to be buckets of sand in the doorway to one of the markets that sold not iPhone batteries, but like the general like silver lithium pouch batteries that you see in like remote control cars and stuff. And that was for putting out lithium fires, right? So,
Okay.
so that's the thing. The other thing is that when you fly out of a Chinese airport, they are they really check battery banks very, very closely. And specifically, you are not allowed to have battery banks that are not very clearly labeled with their capacity. That is like very clearly made by the manufacturer. So there is some like quality bar that Chinese, the equivalent of like TSA, Chinese airport security, is enforcing on battery banks, right? They are not very excited about you flying with your very random market find of a cobbled together Shanghai power bank, which is probably all for the best.
So this problem of low quality parts is not a problem if you are living in China.
Oh, it's a problem. I just don't think exploding batteries is a problem.
Well, that
right?
was
So,
just an example,
yeah.
I mean, there are other YouTubers.
About that. Yeah, we can definitely talk more broadly about quality in China.
Yeah, that was my intention,
I have opinions
actually.
about that. Okay, so I have opinions about quality in China. So I think China has a reputation for low quality and low quality parts and low quality stuff that is not totally deserved, right? Because, I mean, one of the examples that people use for like really high quality electronics is iPhones, right? And iPads, which are manufactured in China, right? So clearly, like, I mean, yes, they're designed in the US, but all of the manufacturing that's done is done in China, and it's so I think that's a very clear sign that like China is capable of making really high quality stuff. The problem is that consumers, including Western consumers, are really cheap, right? They don't like spending a lot for things, which means that there's a high incentive to drive the price of manufacturing on things down. And Chinese manufacturers, in order to win business, really have focused a lot over the past 20 years on how to drive costs down in manufacturing, and that affects quality. So I think one of the things that everybody that I know that either does manufacturing or does sourcing in China, or even just sort of people who are experienced tourists buying things in the market, has realized is that you don't necessarily want to shop around for the lowest price, because you're going to get quality that matches that. And so really, you want to be clear on sort of what you want. And do you want something that's super, super low quality? In which case, yeah, go to the bottom of the barrel pricing. Or do you want something that's sort of middle of the road quality, in which case you're going to probably play a middle of the road price? Or do you want something really premium, in which case you're going to look for sort of like a recognizable brand from a like reputable store, from a reputable seller, right? Kind of thing. The nice thing about China is that it caters to an extremely wide spectrum of price points and qualities, right? And so you can get anything anywhere along that spectrum, and there is very much this attitude in the markets of it is up to the buyer to be responsible for quality. And I think in the West, we are much more used to that sort of being the responsibility of the brand or the retailer, of sort of saying, like, if I buy something at this shop, or I buy something that's made by this manufacturer that at least has this manufacturer's brand on it, and often they're not making themselves, they're having somebody else put their brand on it, they're having the factory put their brand on it, then I can be guaranteed that this is at least of this quality, right? And those brands will spend a lot of time doing quality assurance and quality control. In China, and particularly in Huaqiangbei, it is you as the end buyer, or if you're buying wholesale as the buyer, right, that is entirely responsible for that. And generally, you can ask questions of the seller, and generally you will get honest answers. There are some exceptions. They're like, if you're buying memory, you're not going to get an honest answer sometimes. Right? I never buy SD cards in the market. It's the one thing that I don't buy in the market, because they're often very mislabeled and doing funky things. But outside of that, almost everything that I ask, of like, is this part genuine? Right? Oh, no, this is a copy part. Right? Like, oh, what? I have had people that have steadfastly refused to sell me something because they were adamant that it was not high enough quality for export. It was not high enough. It was for China only, and it was not high enough quality for foreign buyers, right? And I had to be adamant that like I understood that it was a low quality part and that it was cheap and that I didn't care because I was going to break it, right?
Yeah,
so I had
I
to
actually
convince them that I really wanted it, right?
Actually, it's interesting because I can relate to that. In 2011, 2012, there was this Dingo Digital company who did an emulator, portable emulator, for playing all kinds of video game consoles on the go. And there were two versions of this 8320 emulator, one for the Chinese market and one for abroad.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't get the other version because the buttons would be clumsy and so on, and it would not be very high quality. So they said, okay, this is not going outside of China, no matter what.
And so was it a wildly different price as well?
Yeah, well, like 50 euros difference.
That's pretty substantial.
Yeah. And so I said, okay, I'm not going at deal extreme and get the cheaper Chinese version.
Yeah.
I better get the export version because is better quality control. But it's interesting because I wonder, would Chinese really like to get low quality products?
No.
If it was cheaper?
No, they hate it. But sometimes, I mean, it depends, right? Like it depends on sort of how wealthy you are, right? So wealthy Chinese that have lots of disposable income really want original brands. They really want the top quality that they can find. And the people that buy like low quality copies, particularly like let's take Beats headphones, right? You can buy lots of like copy Beats headphones, right? The people that are buying the really cheap Beats headphones are people who can't afford the originals, right? But they think they're cool or whatever. They want a pair of headphones. So it's sort of this, I think there's this aspect of copying and buying copy goods that is brand aspiration, right? Mm-hmm. Like I aspire to be someone who can afford a pair of Beats headphones or who can afford an iPhone, right? And everybody knows that you don't have a pair of original Beats headphones. Like it's, some of the copies are really bad and like you can just tell, right? And the person buying them knows they're not original, right? But it's still like it's that image that brand portrays. They want to be part of that lifestyle. They aspire to be someone that could have that, right? And so buying the copy is like a step in that right direction, right? Does that make sense?
But that actually hurts the original the original manufacturer.
Oh. No, it doesn't though.
It doesn't.
Because they couldn't have afforded to buy a real pair anyway.
Okay.
So you haven't lost a sale, right? It's, someone who's buying a pair of $5, knockoff Beats headphones because they can't afford a more expensive pair of headphones is not going to be an original, is not going to go buy an original pair. Like that's not the alternative. The alternative is buying a no-name pair of headphones, right? But by owning that cheap copy pair, when that person then later gets more money, they often aspire to then own the real thing.
Wow.
Right.
And so I start working for Apple to convince them.
I would love to convince them of this. I mean, this is not purely my idea, but it is one that resonates with me. I've heard other people sort of espouse this. I really do think there is a case to be made that perhaps low quality copy goods that are copying other brands are not entirely detrimental to those brands. And it's obviously very complex, and I think it gets really complicated when you get into areas like clothing and fashion and things, where the line between what is a high quality copy and what is an original good gets very, very, very thin. And then I think there's much more of a case to be made of, and you can get copy goods that are so good that one, they're relatively indistinguishable, and two, the price is not very different, right? Because they're using, that's the other thing, right? So like the $50 difference between the two copies of the game emulator you were talking about, probably like a lot of that $50 goes towards either better parts or better material, right? And so it's not just a matter of quality control, it's actually like they're putting more metal into it, or they're putting a high higher quality part into it, which just drives up the cost of the bill of materials, right? The BOM, right? Which ultimately just sort of affects that top line price, right?
Right.
And so as copies, non-authorized copies, as copies get higher and higher quality, the price is naturally going to rise, and then the ceiling of that price is like the price of buying the genuine thing, right? And so there is this weird place that you get to where there's copies that are like almost indistinguishable, but they're like 75% of the original price, right? And that's, I think, that's the place where I think the big brands are hurting, right? And that's where they stand to lose money, right?
I wonder, you focused a lot on iPhones. I wonder, what about Android phones or let's say tablets and so on?
Yeah.
Are you planning to expand? I mean, AJ is the best example. He actually switched from Apple to Android, right?
Yeah, I did.
So
Haven't looked back.
Yeah. I don't really have. I'm not, contrary to popular belief, I'm not much of an Apple fanboy. I do happen to carry an iPhone, and I do use Mac laptops, but I guess I'm not very fanatical about it. It's just kind of what I've always used, and it works for me, and it's fine. But I guess I don't have any like philosophical opposition to Android. There are some practical reasons why I started with iPhone, and then there are also some separate practical reasons as to why I've continued. I would like to do some Android stuff at some point. The reasons why I chose iPhone originally, I think, are twofold. One is that iPhone is a very recognizable brand, and so I think how I made my own iPhone is a very different video title than how I made my own smartphone. Right. And I think, and so I kind of, chose the iPhone route because of that. I was really worried they were going to sue me. So I'm glad they didn't. Thank you, Apple. So that was one thing. The other thing is that there are more iPhone parts available in the markets. And I think there are two reasons for that. One is that a lot of iPhone manufacturing is done in China, and specifically, at least used to be done in Shenzhen. I think a lot of it's moving up north to Zhejiang, I think.
And Brazil. Apple actually made manufacturers in Sao Paulo some years ago.
But is that just for the Brazilian market?
I don't know, but I know that they had some problems with the Brazilian government because they tried to put the same rules for the workers they did in China, and Brazilian government said no, you can't do that. You have to give people break, enough free time, holidays, and all that stuff.
Interesting. That's a whole nother discussion. We can talk about factories and workers later. I have opinions about that too. But regardless, they have moved. They now have, I don't know, over 100,000 people up in Zhejiang. I think it's Zhejiang. They're called iPhone City now, which is like 1,000 miles north of Shenzhen. But regardless, there is a lot of sort of parts floating through the economy in Shenzhen. The other thing is that there is, in terms of phone models, right? So in phones, all of the parts for each individual model are all different, right? So like if you're buying a battery, you have to buy the one for the iPhone 6S, not the iPhone 6S Plus, right? And not the iPhone 6, right? And that goes for like all of the screws, all of the brackets, all of the cameras, right? Everything is custom for that phone, right? Which is, I think, largely due to the fact that these phones are so small and they're trying to cram so much stuff in that they have to kind of like move everything around every phone duration, which drives Strange Parts fans nuts because they would love it to be possible to like upgrade their phones, right, and to interchange parts. Unfortunately, that is not as simple as I wish it was, or as they wish it was.
With one exception, by the way. There are a lot of people who put iPhone 7 Plus batteries into iPhone 6 Plus because they have a different position of the flex cable, connector cable. But if you play with that and you make some hacks, you can actually put in the phone the other batteries, because the battery of the iPhone 7 Plus is actually larger in capacity from the 6 Plus, but it has the same connector.
I was not aware of that. Yeah, there are a number of models of iPhone that have a either similar or same connector. But then, of course, the flex cable adjusts in length, because the place that they had space for the connector on the board moved because they put in a part. It just on and on and on and on. Right. So the other point I wanted to make is that there are relatively few iPhone models, relative to all of the other Android manufacturers. Right. So there are not. There are. I don't know how many, but let's say 10 iPhone models, maybe. Compared to, if you look at the Android ecosystem, it's hundreds of models, right? And so the market's really, there is sort of just an economy of scale there, right? Where the number of phones of a given iPhone model in the world is so much higher than the number of phones of any Android model, that brokering in iPhone batteries for one or two models of iPhone is a more lucrative business. You just have more potential customers, right? So, so if you go around the markets, I don't know, it's maybe half iPhone and half Android, right? But then in terms of finding parts, you're just for each model, it's much higher, right? So you really have to kind of dig for Android parts, whereas iPhone parts, it's literally everywhere you look, you can sort of find what you need. So that's one of the practical. So those are, I guess, that and the brand recognition are the two practical reasons why I choose to tackle iPhone first. Why I've kept doing it is that as soon as I kind of went down that rabbit hole of making my own iPhone and then the headphone jack thing, I came up with 30 more ideas of stuff I wanted to do for iPhone, and it keeps. And now that people know that I've done iPhone stuff, I keep getting sort of inbound ideas, and people wanting to show me tools or whatever, So it's become very easy to continue to do that, and I now know a lot about it, and so it's been very easy to continue on that way. I would like to do something around Android, and I keep telling people I'll make my own Android phone at some point. And I think the limitation for iPhone, and one of the reasons why I would like to explore Android, is that on the software side, iPhone is so closed, and so there are a number of iPhone hacks and modifications I'd like to do that I have not attempted, because I know that I need more access on the software side than I'll be able to get, right? And so I have a hope that on Android that's going to be a much more feasible thing, and so I'd like to go down that route. At the same time, I think, as I said before, I really am interested in expanding the channel beyond just sort of iPhone and Android and sort of building up those devices. And so right now, I'm placing a lot of focus on factory tours and building that out. We've got some exciting travel planned. So I'm trying to balance that, right? And
as I said,
not get too niche on what we're focusing on. I guess I have really big visions for what Strange Parts can be, and so I'm trying to sort of be broad enough in the content to help people understand what my vision is.
I would like to ask a bit about your motivation and your energy about making YouTube videos, if that is allowed.
Yeah, sure.
Because I think AJ remembers, after we first approached you, there was a month of silence, and I was afraid, okay, maybe Scotty is not interested anymore, and he changed his mind, and and then AJ said, "Oh, just keep emailing him. Maybe something happened to him."
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, I keep emailing." And then suddenly this video popped up where you said why I stopped making Strange Parts, and this was such a sad video to hear, that you had a burnout and had to take a break of 3 months, and spend more time with friends and family than making YouTube videos.
Yeah.
So is this this thing of being always joyful and always in a good mood. Is that a problem?
Does it hurt to be happy all the time?
Yeah.
I think yeah. I mean, that's a really good question, because I think it is something that I struggle with, right? Which is, yeah, I mean, like, I don't always, like, I'm not someone who's always happy all of the time, right? But because I often take quite a bit of time to make a video, there are times where, like, I'm always sort of tracking the plot of the video in my head, right, as I'm making it, and there are times where I know sort of what the scene was prior to this, and I know that, like, I know kind of where I need to be in terms of to make that to make sure there's continuity in the whole rest of the video. And so sometimes, like, yeah, like I am sort of pumping myself up to be happy or excited on camera when that might not be exactly what I'm feeling in that moment that day. And you know, I think yeah, towards the end of last year, I was really sort of feeling burned out of, like, I was just spending all of my time sort of trying to make more content, and I was dealing with, I mean, a good portion of last year I just spent dealing with these, like, heinous issues around my apartment in China, which is just like real estate, at least in Shenzhen, is you know, it's a very rapidly moving target, and there were all sorts of problems with, like, leaks in the roof, and I was actually, like, living in a separate, even worse apartment, and while they were, like, renovating the apartment that I have been shooting in for the past 2 years, and then there were, like, leaks in the roof, and so anyway, I was like living this double life of, like, recording in one apartment and living in another, and that kind of stuff can really drain you over time. And so, yeah, I think, I don't know, I try and be, I guess it's really important to me to try and be really, like, authentic and honest with people on camera. But I think I also sort of want to, I mean, I want to be authentic in the stories that I'm telling, and sometimes that necessitates a little bit of fiction in terms of, like, how I am feeling when I am on camera that day, right? Does that make sense? Am I speaking coherently here? That being said, that can be exhausting,
Yes.
right? So I, you know, like, for example, I have been recording in Tokyo this week, and I got some bad family news. My grandmother passed away earlier in the week, and so, like,
sorry to hear that.
thanks. Yeah, I mean, she was 96, so it wasn't unexpected, and you know, it was kind of, the writing was on the wall, but, like, that is a weird thing to, like, get that news and sort of be processing that on the inside, but, like, that's also not the topic of the video, and, like, bringing that up, like, right in the middle of the video is, like, super weird, right? And so you know, you can either throw that video away and be like, well, I'm not going to finish this, like, I only have a certain amount of time here in Tokyo, right? So I guess I could make a video about that, but I think that's kind of weird too, because, like, that's not really the type of channel that I'm making, right? Is, like, it's not just about sort of my personal life. Or I can sort of just, like, take some time, you know, process that as much as I can, and then it's okay, like, now it's time to go to work, and, like, and sort of put on the Strange Parts face, and, like, go out and do something that, like, I am genuinely, like, the thing that I am making a video about this week, I'm genuinely excited about. Like, I'm going back to Akihabara, like, I found a cool thing, we're taking it apart, we're seeing how it works, like, I can get excited about that. But sometimes it sort of means that I need to take something in my personal life and sort of set that aside for a minute, and like, you know, pump myself up to sort of be in that mode. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I have been to Tokyo 2 years ago. I totally loved it. So
yeah, Tokyo's amazing.
Well, it's just interesting for me that you are so open about your personal feeling and life in your channel, because, as you mentioned in that video, other people who had burnouts, and you know, the community is pretty rushed, and sometimes people lose their income, their subscribers, when there's no video for 3 months.
Yeah, and I was super worried about that.
And also you have, like, a maximum time of 20 minutes, and after that people lose attention. And I was watching your videos and I was like, okay, did I really just watch 42 minutes of a factory visit? You know, and you're not starting like a typical videos like, hi guys, hi hackers, and at the end like, please hit subscribe and like and click on the bell icon so you get notified about the next videos. You do not care about this YouTube language.
Well, I actually do that. I do ask people to subscribe at the end.
Yeah, but not like
every
time the same sentence. You are, yeah.
Well, I actually technically do say the same thing more or less each time. But I'm glad that you don't think so. I'm glad that it feels natural enough.
I tricked the guys. Mission accomplished.
Exactly. It may sound weird, but I work really hard for what I do to appear natural on camera, right? And that is not to say that like it's all fake. I think it's more to say that like recording yourself on camera and having it sound good and look good is hard. And there's like a lot going on, like particularly when I'm doing like the last video that I recorded about the oil painting village and electronics. That was all like walk and talk shots. So it was all sort of this typical vlog shot of like me holding the camera, walking through public. And when I do that, I have to look directly into the camera lens. I can't look into the viewfinder, which is off to the side, because then the eye line is weird and it feels weird to the viewer. Like it feels like we've lost personal connection. Whereas like if I look into the lens, then I'm looking at you in the eye. So I can't see myself, so I can't see the framing of the shot. I sort of have to get the framing right and then look to the lens and then go. I also can't see anything around me. So I can't, like, and I'm walking through a crowded area, I can really only see out of the periphery of my vision what else is going on. And so, and so that's sort of a lot to process while trying to be natural on camera. And for that video, like I wrote a script ahead of time because we were jumping back and forth between locations so quickly that I couldn't just ad-lib it. Like the words had to be on point because I was sort of switching sometimes mid-sentence between locations, which is like filmed on completely different days, right? Mm-hmm. And so I needed to be working off a script so that I knew that when we got into edit that it was all going to match up. And so I'm literally like memorizing lines in between shots and then going out and doing them. And I think I have been really learning how to be myself and be natural and be authentic and be real while juggling all of those things in the background, right? Of like all of those other things are running through my head of like, am I going to run into somebody? Am I in focus? Am I like, is the shot framed properly? Like, can I remember my lines, right? All of that. So that's been a learning process for me. Like I don't have a background as an actor or a presenter or a speaker, and that's just been a lot of like learning how to do that and kind of learning along the way. And I still feel like I'm a relative beginner on doing all of that stuff. Like I feel like I still have a long way to go in terms of really feeling fully comfortable on camera and being able to really do that. I'm in awe of some of the other people, like Casey Neistat's ability to sort of be himself on camera is incredibly phenomenal, and he's I think he's gotten there mostly just through a phenomenal amount of practice, right? He's been doing this for a long time. So
and you have a very high production quality. For example, this I don't know how you call it, this wind surfing board on tires.
Oh yeah, the land yacht.
Wait, yeah. What?
Land yacht. The sailboat with wheels.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been incredibly difficult to shoot. And you actually were making it out of wood or something yourself?
And out of steel. So it's a steel frame and then has like a wooden seat on it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I had made one of those prior. Before I started Strange Parts, and I really thought that would be a cool build for Strange Parts to do. It's sort of a weird thing, and we'd get to do some welding and then go on a little road trip, and I wanted a second one so that I could take friends with me out to the desert to do. In terms of filming, it wasn't too bad. Like the build was pretty easy to film. My biggest problem was that like at times I had the camera too close to the welding splatter. And so, like, I now have like various burn marks on the LCD screen of the camera. Not bad, just little pock marks. And then I noticed that I had I put a UV filter on my camera lenses, which not everybody does, and I'm really glad I did because there was like welding splatter on the lens.
Yeah.
But other than that, like that stuff's pretty straightforward. You have to sort of get your exposures right to show off welding well, I think, because the contrast between sort of the welding, the welding arc and the rest of the room is so big. In terms of shooting the actual like out on the dry lake bed where we were filming, that was actually really easy and fun. It was just a GoPro. It was a GoPro on a clamp that clamps around a pipe, and because there are so many mount points on a land yacht, the land yachts are really easy to tip over. You can just sort of grab the mast and pull them over, and because you're not in water, you can just step out of them and pull the whole thing over. And so, we were doing things like pulling it over and then putting the GoPro at the top of the mast looking down, right? And you get an amazing shot. And so you literally just stop sailing, you grab the GoPro, you clamp it on the top, you start it recording, you sail for a minute or two, you stop, you turn it off, and then you just move it somewhere else on the land yacht, right? And so it's really easy to get like a big variety of shots with, I think we only had one GoPro out there with us, right? And we just handed it off between us, and we're mostly just sailing around and having fun, right? Wow. And then I had my GH5, like my big main camera, and I had that on like a little, just the Gorilla Pod, and I had that in my lap, and so then at various times I would sort of pull that out and do sort of the standard vlogging shot, holding it in front of me or holding it off to the side or whatever. And so that's how I kind of got the medium shots to me that were higher quality. And then I would just stop and set that down on the Gorilla Pod and then sail, turn around and sail past it, right? And so then that's how we got sort of the moving shots, like the thick stationary moving shots, right? And then you just turn around and you go and pick it up again and you move it somewhere else, right? And so, I don't know. I had most of those shots in like an hour or two, maybe, of just sort of screwing around, putting cameras in various places, right? And then we spent most of the rest of the afternoon just goofing off in the lake bed.
People loved it, according to the comments of the video.
Yeah, I think so. That one has less views than pretty much all of the others. So I think it was a little too far in left field. I don't know. I'd be curious to know why that didn't do nearly as well. I really like that one.
Maybe I shouldn't have brought up the question, so you wouldn't worry too much in the future, because I really like that.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. I don't really worry about it. I'm often perplexed of like, why does something do well and something else not do well? I don't know.
Yeah.
So where do you want to go from here? Let's talk a bit about the future. You are having your office now, or still looking?
Workshop. So we just started doing that. So the thing that just happened, which I'm super excited about, is I've hired a head of operations, right? And so he just started a week ago, 2 weeks ago. We were together in Shenzhen, and then he had to go back to Canada for a family commitment that had been longstanding, and I had already planned this trip to Japan, and then we'll be back together in Shenzhen a week after next. So that for me is a big inflection point, because it means hopefully that I can hand off a bunch of stuff on the business side of Strange Parts, that sponsorships and lining up factory tours and tracking down suppliers for things and researching stories. There's just like all of this stuff that happens in the background that eats up sort of time and attention, that is not actually like going out and shooting video, right? And so I'm really excited about that. And that was sort of like after I sort of had the burnout, and then I had the apartment eviction, right? I got like a week and a half notice that I had to be out of my apartment in Shenzhen, which is where I did all the filming. And so I've been like living in a hotel for the past couple months in China. And so phase one was like really find that head of operations. Phase two is he is now just starting the process of looking for that workshop, right? And that will give us that new sort of space, that where I can set up a whole bunch of equipment and shoot on a regular basis, right? To sort of do these more in depth. I really want to get back to making stuff, right? And doing these sort of crazy hardware adventures. And that's kind of been on hold. And I've been doing more of the like travel stuff and factory tours and market tours and kind of things to keep the channel going while we get that workshop in place. And then phase three will be me finding an apartment somewhere near that workshop. The workshop is going to be harder for us to find, and hopefully moving out of the hotel sometime soon. So
good luck with that.
Yeah, thanks. So that's sort of all the infrastructure we need. And then I think really like I want to get back to building stuff. we're actively now lining up some really exciting factory tours, and I'm really excited to build out this factory tour format that I've kind of dabbled in. And we've done 3 videos so far, touring factories. The one I'm most proud of is the PCB factory tour that we did. That was really well received. People really liked that, and there's so many more factories that I want to go and show people, and then I want to go see myself. So we're going to do that, and then I really want to do some stuff in other countries. So as I mentioned before, like Africa, India, Bangladesh, Vietnam. Like there's some really exciting manufacturing stuff, some exciting market stuff, right? And really starting to get my feet wet in that, get our feet wet in that, and sort of go out and find some new interesting stuff that people haven't really seen before. So
great.
Awesome.
So where can people find your stuff?
So you can go to youtube.com/strangeparts is the YouTube channel, strangeparts.com, or we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all under Strange Parts. So you just search for Strange Parts.
Awesome.
Great.
We'll put links to everything in the podcast description and under the video and everything else.
Awesome.
Great. So thanks. You almost talked for 2 hours. Oh my God!
Awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah. I had no doubt that we would have plenty to talk about.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful that you are so open. I wasn't sure if you liked the personal questions so much.
No, it's fine. I figure anything that I've talked about on the channel is fair game to ask in an interview. So yeah, it's totally fine.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thanks.
Have a good night, guys.
Bye.
Right, thank you.
You too. Bye.
Good day, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
Okay. Take care.
Yep.